Okay, this is the second video for Word Module 1. And in this video, we are going to create an envelope for the business letter that we previously typed. And then for the second part of this video, we are going to create a flyer. But first, let's get started with the envelope. So the way that you create envelopes is you're going to click on the Mailings tab and then select Envelopes. Notice that it automatically pulled some information from our business letter. Unfortunately, this is not the information that I want to use for the delivery address, so I'm going to hit backspace and I'm going to type the delivery address myself. This is from step 3 if you're following along in the textbook, or you can just grab it from the actual letter. Ooh. For the return address, it asks us to use the college's address. So I'm just going to use Johnson County Community College. And I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what the address is for Johnson County, but I don't know if I can remember it. So we might just have to wing it for now. I'm pulling it up quickly to see if I can. Yeah, 12345 College Boulevard. I knew it was something simple like that. And that is Overland Park, Kansas. Zip code is 66210. Then you can just hit Add to Document. Do you want to save the new return address as the default? I'm going to say no. You could say yes if this was like your personal computer and you were using your personal address and it's always going to be the same return address. You could say yes, but I'm going to go ahead and say no on that one. And you will see that it adds an envelope to the top of our business letter. So when you go to print this business letter, you could feed a legal sized envelope into your printer and it would print your envelope first, and then it would print the letter that's associated with the envelope. Okay, so that finishes off the first part. Go ahead and hit save, and that will save all of our current changes. And then I need you to open up file 1-4. And again, you can get these files from our course. It looks, is it 1-4 or 1-3 that I need you to open up? Oop, I'm so sorry. It's 1-3 is what I need you to open up from our course. When you open it, it looks like this, and we are going to make some corrections to this flyer and change it into a pretty good looking flyer that we could post on a bulletin board somewhere to relay some information. First things first, we need to go ahead and do a save as. So I'm going to go ahead and do a file, save as, browse, and select the location that you would like to save this, whether it be OneDrive or your personal desktop or your flash drive. I click browse. I'm going to go ahead and save this to the desktop for myself. And we're going to name it NP_WD_, and then it tells us to save it as, I'm trying to see here. I'm so sorry because I can't find it. Where is it? Drinking water. I'm so sorry, I couldn't find it. Drinking water is the name of this one. And then go ahead and hit save. I'm going to make no space there. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make some spelling and grammar corrections. Whenever you see a red wavy underline, you know there's a spelling error, and then the double underline is a grammatical error. So I'm going to check the entire document by clicking on the Review tab and doing ABC check. When you're doing Microsoft Word, when you're using Microsoft Word, there's usually 2 or 3 ways to accomplish the same task. So if you find a quicker way or a way that works better for you to do spelling and grammar check, then you can do it that way as well. I always tell my students there's usually 2 or 3 ways to accomplish the same exact thing in Microsoft. So you're going to see here in the editor pane that we have 3 results, 2 spelling errors, 1 grammar error. I'm going to go ahead and do the spelling errors first. It tells me that wonder is spelled incorrectly and gives me the correct suggestion. I'm going to click on the correct suggestion so it will change it. It says contact is also spelled wrong. It is, in fact, so I'm going to click on the correct contact. Notice that it's not flagging Alzacar because I asked it to ignore all of that before. But it is flagging facilities as a grammar error, and it will tell you why it's flagging it. In this case, it says remove redundant punctuation. And in fact, I do want to remove one of those periods and only have one period there. So I'm going to make that correction, and we are good. So, and as we type, if you see that you're typing or editing something and you make an additional error, you can go back and change that later. Feel free to close out of the editor pane by clicking the X. It does take up a little bit of space. One other thing I want to draw your attention to is the last line of text where it says today and it's capitalizing today. Sometimes it will miss things like this because it isn't technically spelled incorrectly. So you have to still proofread your paper is the point of this, and correct any errors that you see that pop up that may not be caught by Microsoft. Usually most everything is caught, but if something is not spelled incorrectly, maybe you just use it in the wrong tense. And even if you use it in the wrong tense, sometimes grammar will flag that, but occasionally there'll be little things that happen like what you just saw that it doesn't flag. So you have to still check it yourself. Okay, the next thing it asks us to do is change the page orientation from portrait, which is what we're in now, to landscape. So orientation is on the layout tab. And click the drop down arrow next to orientation and select landscape. So what that did is it now stretched out our paper, so it is now longer than it is wide. The next thing it asks us to do is to change the margins to narrow. So narrow is one of the preset options in the list, so we don't need to do custom margin. We can just select narrow, and it makes all of the margins 0.5. So you can see how we have less white space now around the outside of our paper. The last thing that we're going to do here to kind of get us all set up before we start really digging into editing the document is to format the document text to 22-point Times New Roman font. So I'm just going to highlight it all. I'm just going to click and drag down to highlight it all. And you'll notice when you click and highlight, a quick access toolbar pops up. I clicked away before you could see it, but that is kind of like a shortcut toolbar that allows you to make simple edits. So you don't have to go back to the home tab and do it this way. I'm going to go ahead and do it this way. So I'm going to change my font to 22. I'm frozen. Give me 1 second. There we go. And I'm going to change my font style. It asks to Times New Roman. The list of fonts are in alphabetical order, but if you start typing the word Times New Roman, it will pop up and you can just hit enter to change it. So that way you don't have to scroll all the way through the list to the T's to get to Times New Roman. It's now asking us to center align the text and the photo. Your alignment buttons are in the paragraph group. And I'm hovering over the center align right now, and you're going to see that moves everything to the middle of the paper. Now it's asking us to format the first paragraph with an outside border using the default style, which is just a black solid line. And we're going to change the color to gold accent 4 and the width of the border to 1.5 point font. So I'm going to show you how we're going to do that. The best way to be able to tell what the first paragraph is to use your show hide button. And the show hide button is on the home tab. It's the little paragraph button. It's in the paragraph group. If you click that, it's going to add formatting marks to your paper. Now, these formatting marks are non-printing character, so if I were to print this, they would not show up. But what you can see is every time you hit a space bar, a dot pops up in between your words, and every time you hit enter to start a new paragraph, a paragraph sign pops up, so you can see exactly where all of your paragraphs are. So if it asks me to highlight the first paragraph, it's basically asking me to highlight the top line. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight the top line, and I'm going to add a border. My borders button is on the home tab, again in the paragraph group, and it's next to the tipping over paint can. Go ahead and select borders and shading all the way down to the bottom. Now, there are some preset options here that you could do. So if you wanted like an outside border so it goes all the way around, I could do that. and it would add just an outside border around the outside of the paragraph. But in this case, it asked me to format the border a little bit more specifically. If you remember, the directions say to make it gold and to make it 1.5 point, which means it needs to be thicker. So in order to do those changes, I need to go all the way down to the bottom where it says borders and shading, and I'm going to open up a box that allows me to format my border a little bit more. So I can change the color of the border, and it asked me to pick gold accent 4. So I'm going to select that. And it asked me to change it to 1.5 point width. So again, that makes it just a little bit thicker. I'm going to say okay, and then you'll see it'll update that. It also asked me to add a shading color inside the box. So the shading is the tipping over paint can is your shading. You could also access, and you can just hover over these colors, by the way, and it gives you like a live preview so you could see what it's going to look like before you select it. You could also get to shading by going to that same borders button and going down to borders and shading, and you'll see there's a shading tab up here as well. So I could pick a color to shade this way, or you could pick the tipping over paint can. Again, there's multiple ways to accomplish the same task in Microsoft. The color of shading that it asks us to do is blue, shading to the paragraph using blue accent 5. So I think that's just the top blue. Nope, that's blue accent 1. How about over to the other blue? There it is. And just say okay. Excuse me. And now it adds the blue shading color to our paragraph. Another thing that it's going to ask us to do is to change our text to white. So the text color is the A in the font group, and it asks us to make our font white. It's better that way because what that does is it adds a better contrast. It's also going to ask us to increase the amount of space between our top line and our second line. So we can increase the spacing to kind of space it out a little bit more by clicking that same line and paragraph spacing button that we used in the other module, the first part of the module. I'm going to click the drop down arrow, and I'm going to go to line and spacing paragraph options. Once I'm here, I can change the spacing before or after the paragraph. I want to change it after the first paragraph, and I'm going to increase it to, the book asks us to increase it to 42 points of font. I'm going to say okay. And what you're going to see now is a large chunk here that was changed to kind of space it out. All right, I'm going to show you one other trick before we kind of conclude here on this. We're going to use the command that's called Format Painter, and it's a paintbrush. It's on the Home tab in the clipboard group. You'll see it right over here. What that does is it allows you to copy formats. So I want to copy all of these formats that I just set on my top line. So I'm going to highlight it. Then I'm going to click my paintbrush, my Format Painter. And you're going to notice that my cursor now turns to a paintbrush, and I'm going to highlight the last line of text. And what it does is it just copies the formats for you, so it saves you a little bit of time. It's a shortcut, so you don't have to go to the last line of text and set those same formats that we set in the first line of text. It also asks us to add 42 points of font before the last line of text to kind of separate it as well. So I'm going to go to my line and paragraph spacing button again, go to line spacing options. And in this case, I want to add 42 points of space before. And look what it did. It kind of spaced out that bottom line of text as well. Now, there are some other basic formats that we could do to this. For example, it asks us to add a text effect to the second line of text here, the second paragraph. Your text effects button is kind of like word art. It adds just a cool feature to your text, and it's the A, and lots of different options here, and even more down here that you can play around with for text effects. I think it asks us to add format the third and fourth paragraph. Let's just pick one. Lots of different choices. I'm just going to pick the gray because I think it looks cool. Not a great contrast, but still looks pretty cool. And it just adds another element to your text. The last thing that you can do is you can edit your picture by selecting it, and you'll notice that a special picture format tab pops up above. And anything on this special tab is there to help you edit your picture. So you could change the size of your picture all the way over to the far right. You could crop it. You could add some borders or effects. Click the drop-down arrow in the picture styles, and there's lots of cool styles. If you hover over them, a screen tip pops up and tells you the name of it. So if the book asks you for a name, a specific one, hover over and select it. Lots of different edits. It's not Photoshop as far as editing pictures go, but there are a lot of cool things that you can do on this picture format tab. Now, when I deselect the picture, notice that that tab goes away. When I reselect it, it comes back. So that's some basic information here about editing a flyer. We could print this off and post it around the community to give information to people. So that concludes Module 1 video.